Okay, so thank you so much everyone for coming. Welcome to London Met University. I hope you managed to find us eventually and are now all settled in here. So I'm just going to start by introducing the team who you'll get to meet in person as the day goes on anyway. Talking through what the agenda is going to be and then giving you some kind of background that will help for the workshops we're going to do in the afternoon. So I'm Sian. Some of you I already know from interviews or other contacts. I'm a co-researcher on the Wild Ways project with Justin. We've also been working for a long time with Alex, everyone just waves when I say your name, as a research assistant. And we've also been working with Nina, who's from Oxford Brookes University, since pretty early on in the study. Today we've kindly got some people helping out on the wider team. Deanna, who's part of our CARES research group that this sort of falls partly under, Marbell as well, and we also have Lucy, who's been doing a sterling job of organisation, and if you've got any problems she'll solve them, and also Magda at the back there, who's going to be taking some photos. If anyone isn't happy to be included in photos and hasn't let us know already, then please do at some point during the day. Okay. So, has everyone done the consent form? Yes. If anyone hasn't, then please make sure you do by the end of the morning. So we have the QR code here. We have paper copies if you prefer to do it that way. And you can see what you're signing up to on the sheets on each table. And we basically need you to agree to everything except the photo taking is optional. Okay, so our plan is only a little bit later than scheduled. Introductions and presentations now. So you'll meet the research team in more detail throughout the day. In a moment, Lucy is going to tell us about the kind of project's background at London Met in terms of London Met Lab and its environment and challenge. Then I will talk to you about some background about rewilding in London, including my rewildmystreet project, which was the kind of is a sort of public campaign and was the sort of inspiration behind this Wild Ways study. Then we're making sure we get lots of breaks for everyone to chat and to decompress. Then we will sort of start to prepare a little bit for the workshop and get you guys to start getting involved and doing some work. So we're going to do a kind of hopefully fun warm-up exercise about what you think urban rewilding is, particularly in the context of London's private gardens. And then we'll talk about what we're going to do in the afternoon workshops and split you into groups. I think probably we're going to do 2 groups based on the good turnout that we have. Then after lunch we will go into the workshops in 2 parts. So we'll be using this room and another room downstairs, and we'll have 2 kind of different types of workshops, so you get to do a different thing in each session, but it's essentially going to be trying to draw out your ideas to help us come up with a strategy for something that might work in London for actually making a difference and influencing urban rewilding positively in private gardens. So that's the plan, and then we'll come back here at the end of the day. We're hoping to finish a bit earlier than advertised to let you all go, but we'll just talk about the sort of roundup of the workshops, tell you what we're going to do next with the information we've got today and how we'll kind of communicate with you in future, and take any kind of questions or comments that you might have after the day. Does that sound okay? Fabulous. So I'm going to hand over to Lucy to talk to us about London Met Lab.
Hi everyone, so I'm Lucy. I'm the Civic and Community Engagement Officer at London Met Lab. So London Met Lab is basically the university's civic and community strategy to help tackle issues in London with the help of our students and our staff. So before I go into further details, I want to show you a video just so you can get a better idea of what the kind of work we do, and who's involved, and who we work with.
This is London. It's one of the most diverse cities in the world, and despite accounting for only 0.01% of the UK's total land size, it's responsible for 10% of the economic output. It's home to over 80 billionaires and more than 100,000 millionaires. But there's a word you may not typically associate with London: inequality. So, how do we solve it?
You can't solve inequality in one sentence.
This is Sophie Clouterbuck. She's the Director of London Engagement at London Metropolitan University.
The London Met Labs is our civic and community strategy for the university. The point of the labs is to look at challenges that London faces as a city as a whole. I'm very proud that we're actually known within the country as one of the best civic universities now.
So what is a civic university? A civic university's role is about much more than getting students degrees. It's about using the expertise of staff and students to make a positive impact on the local community.
London Met is completely dedicated to working in the community and to working with the community, more importantly.
It's very wide in scope, so there's an enormous amount of different projects going on. Tower Hamlets, Hackney, Haringey, Islington, with a range of boroughs and partners.
And local authorities need more help than ever. This is Rulan Kondokar, a local councillor.
There's been a lot of challenges, or a lot of growing challenges in society. That funding pot to local councils has been, reduced significantly, almost 70% over the last 10 years. It's starting to show now, the local councils are struggling.
After looking at all the challenges London has, which started off as hundreds, got down to 18 and is now down to 6, we're looking at crime, social wealth, poverty and deprivation, the environment, health improvement and discrimination.
My name is Councillor Kaya Comer-Swartz and I'm the leader of Islington Council. What's great about Islington is that it's a place that's very kind of community spirited and community minded, and I think it is an opportunity for everyone who works here or studies here at London Met to be part of that community.
Doing something that matters to you and to others, that is for the betterment of people, can get you somewhere and does lead to change.
It's also important to me now as leader to find other opportunities where we can come together as people in the borough that otherwise have no real reason to come together, but in a joint mission to serve the residents of Islington and make their lives better.
So if you want to be involved in London Met Labs, how do you do that?
Contact me.
Yep, so that's kind of like a teaser kind of promo video that we did for the London Met Lab.
This is London.
Yeah. And then I narrated that video. Basically for London Met Lab, I'm part of the core team at the London Met Lab. So I look after our partnerships and projects that we do with the local community. I organize events, social media, basically everything. And then we have, the wider other teams, the research team, which is made up of Justin, Sean, Deanna here, and also Mabel. So we're all part of the London Met Lab. So what are our goals? So basically our goals is to embrace the priorities of our partners So that's community organizations, local residents, and then any concerns they have in order to support, the economy and address any social issues in London. So we aim to provide London with value-driven graduates, who will support, London's transformation. And also, in return, we provide opportunities to them and our staff to give back to our city. So how do we do this? So we engage with, our partners, other universities, and also our alumni to co-design these solutions to these challenges in London, which I'm going to go into more detail about later. And we also want to influence policy making. So, we want our research to make a difference so that, the government can be informed of really what's going on in the community and, take proper measures to address them. And, of course, we want to develop lasting, and meaningful relationships with our community along the way as well. We want to draw on funding opportunities, to support research collaborations. And in our curriculum, we always, embed social justice into it. As you know, a main part of our work is undertaking research and impact work. And then we also aim to involve our students and staff in local community initiatives and any volunteer initiatives as well. So these are the challenges I mentioned earlier. So we focus mainly on 6 challenges, as you see here. So crime, discrimination, environment, health improvement, poverty, deprivation, and also social wealth. So most of our work goes under one of these categories. So at the London Met Lab, we also run 5 free and low-cost clinics that's open to the local community to use. So our architecture design projects office, they mainly focus on, making art, art or art installations or designs, around the city. The injury and rehabilitation clinic, they're a low-cost clinic. So basically, you get a very discounted rate if you have injuries or need, physiotherapy. So, I'm just going to give an example. So the standard, if you were to get, a physiotherapy session elsewhere, it will cost at least 70 quid and above. But here, they only charge like 40 to 50 quid. So that's just giving you a rough number. And if you're on universal credit, it is free for people on universal credit. And we also have a legal advice clinic. It's free as well. We have a small business clinic that provides consultancy services to help, small to medium businesses flourish. And also we have the charities and social enterprise clinic, which also goes without saying helps charities and social enterprises. So basically, all of these clinics are free except for the injury and rehabilitation clinic. So you see here, this is like, some of our staff. We have more, that aren't pictured. But basically, at the London Met Lab, we have professional services staff and academics who we call challenge champions, because they would basically choose one of the challenge that we aim to address, and then they would be, for example, an environment challenge champion or whatsoever, and focus in that area. And then recently this year, we actually launched our own research center. It's called CARES, the Center for Applied Research Empowering Society. So what we do, at the research center, we have more than 40 academics, already. And Diana here, she's the director of CARES. So what sets them apart from the usual research centers is that they do applied research, which means, they go out into the community, they talk to people to see what they need, what, they want to do, like what kind of projects that they want to do that will help. And then with the research findings, it would be, really help, in terms of practicality wise. you know, as opposed to usual researchers, you know, they usually already have a research topic in mind, you know, and then so they try to find people who's willing to engage, but they're not really considering what people really want. And then we are also involved in the health determinants research collaboration with Tower Hamlets. So basically, this is so we got a $5 million grant to do this with UCL and Queen Mary. So what we do is that so the 3 universities plus researchers and community residents are all working together to basically find out, you know, what causes health inequality. Yeah. So this is like a big project for us, ongoing for the next 5 years. So these are just some of the some examples, very small selection of the recent work that we did. You know, as I just said, you know, we secured $5 million grant to research health inequalities in Tower Hamlets. You know, we did research with Islington and Haringey Council to understand, you know, what are the employment barriers, you know, to people with disability and also the BAME groups. Our Social Integration and Regeneration Learning Network also published an evaluation report on their work, which was commissioned by Mayor of London, and have continued the Connected Communities project. We've evaluated Camden, Tower Hamlets, and Islington's violence reduction units. You know, we've collaborated with Islington on rewilding its largest park in the borough, Highbury Fields, which, you know, Sean is primarily in charge of. And we also have a project called Reimagining Newham Hospital as Healthy, which is basically using design thinking to kind of create a hospital to function as a community asset to everyone. So they, you know, they use stuff, you know, they use methods like spatial planning and etc. Yeah. So so going forward, this is just like kind of case study on Islington, because majority of our work has taken place in Islington so far. So these are just some images of us in action. So we've organized community events with Arsenal and Lavazza Coffee at the Emirates Stadium in the top left-hand corner. So it's basically a community celebration event where we want to show our support for North Londoners to pursue their ambitions. And so people, you know, families came out, you know, to entertainment, you know, subsidized food, all of that, face painting, you know, the kids had a lot of fun. You know, we're part of the living wage group. Yeah, so we pay, you know, London living wage to, you know, all of the students, you know, who undertake temporary employment with us at the university, you know. And these are just some of the organizations that we work with, you know, National Youth Theatre, you know, very local in Islington. We work with Manor Gardens Trust, you know, we work with the council, of course, the Big House, and then we also work with the Anti-Apartheid Legacy and Lavazza Coffee, in which you see the mural right here. So that we did that actually in partnership with them. Yeah. And then here we did a video project with elders in Islington, you know, kind of to celebrate aging, you know. So basically, you know, they were interviewed, you know, telling their story and their experiences of what aging means to them. So that was quite a, you know, meaningful project, and we had an exhibition at a venue in Islington. And this is our some of the work that our students did with Anti-Apartheid Legacy. So they've created all of these, you know, posters and assets, and also other commission work for them. And this is just a list, but not all of them, because we have so many projects that we probably can't really include all of them on one slide of all of the work that we've done in Islington so far. Yeah. And yeah, that's it from me regarding the Met Lab.
Do you want to do the housekeeping?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, and I forgot to do the housekeeping. So if you need to use the toilet, just like when you exit, go straight, turn left, and then when you see the lift, it's right across from the lift. And then in terms of fire safety, once you exit this room, just go straight, and then if you look to your right, there's an exit that would take you downstairs. So you can just go down the stairs, and then we will all just meet on Benwell Road. Yeah, and that's it.
Thank you, Lucy.
Okay.
So just checking, are there any questions for Lucy on that background? Okay. I think that, yes, go for it. Yeah, we're recording the slides, so we should be able to do that. Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. Don't see why not. So that hopefully that's quite a broad kind of context to what we do at London Met Lab. Justin and I are both challenge champions. Justin for public health, me for environment, and I lead the environment challenge. So this project sort of fits very directly into that sort of environment scene and working with people in the capital. And so we've worked with Hammersmith and Fulham Council and other people in a kind of advisory role as well as part of that. And we're also part of the CARES research group, and the other good thing about that is that it's interdisciplinary. So my background is architecture and design, and I'm part of the Art, Architecture and Design School, whereas Justin part of the School of Social Sciences and Professions and expert in behavioural science. So it's quite a nice meeting of different worlds as well. So I wanted to follow on from that to give a bit of context to rewilding in London. Some of you are kind of very educated in this room, I know already about this, so some of it won't be new to you, but there are some kind of key documents. So the Mayor of London is quite progressive and active in this area on a kind of regional level. So there are key documents such as the London Environment Strategy, which is from 2018, which feeds directly into the London Plan, the main sort of planning strategy document. And that includes targets for having London being over 50% green and blue space, so blue space being water, and increasing its tree cover to by 10% by 2050. So quite ambitious targets. And then as part of that, the Mayor also created the London Rewilding Task Force, which were a group who kind of worked together on the particular challenge of rewilding in the capital and came up with the task force report, which I think was 2023, which has recommendations and lots of funding associated with it. So there are things happening already at regional level. If you don't already know, London became the world's first national park city in 2019, and again that's something that's endorsed by the Mayor's office and very much part of that. It comes with a charter which is a commitment to the capital becoming greener, healthier and wilder. And following the model of national parks generally, there are rangers, hundreds of rangers that have been appointed to help sort of promote this campaign. And there's even a visitor centre now which you can go to in Fleet Street, which is quite fun, where they have lots of events and engagement, and then it's open certain days. Check before you go, because when I went it was closed. But that's a really kind of nice aspect, that they have that physical presence. In terms of London councils, lots of London councils, they obviously have to follow the Mayor's targets and policy ultimately, but there is quite a lot of disparity between what individual councils throughout the region are doing. One kind of example to show that is what's happening on kind of pesticide use in public areas of boroughs, and Pesticide Action Network have a kind of campaign to make London pesticide free, so that pesticides aren't used to routinely sort of spray areas of public land, which has dangers for wildlife as well as for human and pet health. And they found that 1 in 3 boroughs had phased out or significantly reduced pesticide use, so very much going in the right direction, and others had committed to taking action. Ealing, for whatever reason, didn't respond, so draw from that what conclusions you will. But then they have got beavers, so the only place you can see beavers in London, so they're doing some things right. So it's not to name and shame at all, but just to say there is kind of disparity about the rate and extent to which some of these rewilding things might be happening across London boroughs, which I'm sure will come out of our discussions. In terms of London's gardens, obviously not much policy or action is focused on that because they're very hard to influence. So we've taken on a difficult challenge here with you to try to influence that difficult area, because it's not somewhere you can sort of legislate over. People feel quite particular about what happens in their gardens. But there are some useful publications. So there's London Zoo's Rewilding Our Cities, which is about cities generally, but obviously they have a London focus, and they stipulate in that gardens are a key part of any kind of rewilding initiative. This report is getting a little bit old now, but Green Space Information Greater London commissioned a report called London Garden City in 2010, which covered a sort of 10-year period, and they found that London loses the equivalent of 2.5 Hyde Parks of green space a year just through how residents manage their gardens. And from kind of the latest, as I say, that's getting quite old, but from anecdotally what I see around me, and from the latest sort of national surveys of 1 in 10 people have laid down artificial grass, 1 in 3 have paved over front gardens. I think that's probably something that is continuing as a trend. Why does that matter? Why are London's gardens important? 1/4 of the landmass of London is made up of private gardens, so it's a significant total amount of land, and they can provide important wildlife habitat. If you just look at this plan, aerial view of a street, you can sort of see maybe gardens in the way that wildlife might, that it's sort of a linear park potentially of the back and the front gardens connecting up. So there's a significant area of land that could be habitat, but also they sort of act potentially as a wildlife corridor, so that they link up for wildlife to wider green spaces, so things like allotments, parks, cemeteries, playing fields that might form important routes for wildlife between those kind of green resources. So not good if we're doing this. So because of that kind of situation with London's gardens, I started the rewildmystreet project, which I'm sure a lot of you will know about through this. But if not, I just wanted to talk you through that, partly because we don't want this to limit your creativity, but it might be that part of the ideas that come out of this afternoon we can try to test through rewildmystreet in the next stage of the project. But as I say, we don't want that to limit your creativity, because we also want to be able to make kind of policy toolkits and things like that where we can use our influence hopefully on other people. But it'd be good to kind of keep this in mind of one example of a sort of conservation effort in London. So this partly looks, as in this sort of imagined postcard from a future London, imagining that London might be known as an urban jungle in a good way. Partly looks at kind of public spaces generally, so the wild belt trail replacing the green belt, tiny forest squares occupying some of the kind of concrete squares we currently have, pocket parks where maybe there used to be retail units and offices that aren't used so much post-COVID, but also very much focusing on the residential in the streetscape, having kind of wild play streets that aren't dominated by cars, but are where children can discover nature on their doorsteps, but also what we're going to be talking about this afternoon about what people do in their private land. You will get one of these postcards in your goodie bag, so I'm not going to read out the back, but it's sort of a message from a time-travelling Londoner back to us today, telling us how great it could be in the future and wish you were here. So have a read of that, and there are more postcards on the website for each of those spaces if you want to read those. So the project is focused around a website, rewildmystreet.org, and the idea is that it uses kind of architectural drawings and design as a way to organise guidance, often from other places, because lots of places have good conservation guidance out there, but to kind of curate that in a way that's tuned to sort of good design, but also to an urban context. It started off as just London, and I've broadened it a bit because of noticing who was signing up. But very much the sort of drawings that are used in it and stuff are sort of London inspired. So it talks about species and mini habitats that you might reasonably be able to create in London gardens, and ways to achieve that either through products that you can buy quickly off the shelf, or through more kind of cheaper hands-on DIY activities that you could do with your family or friends or community. And then also has inspiration about urban rewilding more generally. So it uses these architectural drawings, which are different views of a kind of imagined rewilded street, to organise that guidance. And I should say that all these are done in collaboration with students and graduates of London Met, so very much kind of, being embedded in the university. So, for example, this drawing that shows a kind of cut through of a typical terraced house, street and garden talks about the different species that you might see. Britain's favourite mammal, the hedgehog, which I have seen on a camera trap in my garden, but there aren't loads of them in London. And all of the drawings have keys, so that you can then look up that species and go through to, as I say, often external guidance. So this is Hedgehog Street, which is a really nice website where you can find out more about that mammal. The habitats are arranged around this drawing, a kind of aerial view of a street, which shows sort of more radical things that could be done with an existing street layout in the streets, but also what could be done in individual gardens. And if you wanted to make a mini meadow, like this sort of swathe of meadows, then again it has a key which links through to Kew Gardens advice in this case on why meadows are important. For products, the sort of front street view and back garden view below are used to organise that. And if you wanted to make, I think this is a pond, yeah, I'm going with a pond theme, a container pond, say on your patio or front garden, then you can get a complete off-the-shelf kit, which will be a slightly more expensive way to do it, but an easy way to do it. Or you can create something like that yourself. And on the activities page, it has somebody digging a pond here. And again, you can go through to these. These are our own guidance in this case for the activities. So these pattern drawings, as we call them, show the sort of design and wildlife considerations of doing each of those activities. So in the case of a pond, that is kind of labelled up with how you might do that and how you want to do things like make sure wildlife can get in and out, and use planting that is beneficial to pollinators and so on. And finally, you don't have to have a garden, and when we're talking this afternoon we can be thinking about people who might just have a balcony, but they could still fill it with lots of things, as in this illustration. Might just have a window ledge or window box. So we don't need to be restricted into, sort of elitist. We can recognise that not everyone in London is lucky enough to have a big outdoor space at all. In your packs you will get one of these Wild Makeover guides, but this sort of gives you 5 activities to get started on rewilding your own outdoor space. And again, created with an illustration student or graduate now. So sticking with the pond theme, that gives a kind of step-by-step instructions of how you would go about that. And for anyone who hasn't and would like to sign up to Rewild My Street, or also on social media, we send out monthly wild makeover tips, which are kind of seasonal, sort of topical, small tips of what you might do in your own space. So the one in May was about being inspired by Chelsea Flower Show and the trends there from this year, and how you might adapt those to be also beneficial to wildlife while having a bit of a designer garden makeover. In June, we do a post every day as part of the Wildlife Trust's 30 Days Wild, so you can get bombarded on social media in June if you want to sign up to @rewildmystreet. And there is also a QR code if you want to do that. So as I said, 30 Days Wild, this is from last year, but with the help of Magda at the back there, I've been doing a daily post throughout June, and we have a kind of different theme that organises that. So this year we did benefits of urban nature and going through kind of different benefits, and then concerns about urban nature and going through how those can be addressed. And that's what I wanted to say about the project and the background. Any questions at that point? Okay, so I'm going to hand over mainly to Justin, and might chip in occasionally, and we're going to talk to you. Yeah.
So I'm surrounded by people who are painting over their back gardens.
Yeah.
How do you persuade people of the benefits of what you're not doing?
Well, I think that's what we need, one of the questions to answer this afternoon, isn't it? So I think no one's come up with the perfect answer yet, so we're going to do it this afternoon. So bring that to the workshop, and it's good that everyone else has got it in mind now. That is key, isn't it, to behaviour change, is persuading people. Were there a couple of other hands or something? No? Okay. So Justin will lead on talking about what we found out from the Wild Ways study so far in stages 1 and 2, and today is basically the start of stage 3.
Does anybody want a quick coffee refill? Should we take literally 2 minutes, coffees, coffee break and come back?
Yeah, okay, let's do that.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Sorry?
I'm sugared up, yeah.
Okay, should we get on to the next bit? Hopefully you're slightly refreshed before we get into the research. I've done it. So hi, I'm Justin. I'm going to talk you through the research that we've taken part in regarding urban rewilding, and this kind of is why we're here today, really, is to do number 3. Just to say, there is, if you haven't noticed the screen at the back, there is a screen at the back if you're struggling to see. I won't be offended if you turn your back on me. So we're trying to achieve number 3, which is development of an intervention strategy to promote urban rewilding. That's what we want your help with. So we want to co-create something with you. Sian presented rewildmystreet. That potentially could be the basis of an intervention. It could be improved, something that's developed to try and influence Londoners to partake in urban rewilding. But to be able to do that, we need to understand 1 and 2. So we need to understand why people do or don't take part in urban rewilding, what it means to people. So to achieve that, we've done 2 things. We firstly had a look to see what other people have done first. So before going to collect data from people, we thought we'd look at the research, because others might have done this already. They might already know what the problem is. They might already know why the problem exists and how to overcome it. So before going to talk to people and spend money doing that, we wanted to see what was out there first. So that was the first step, is to look at the published literature that other researchers have done, as well as all of the reports out there from key organisations, and see what we could find out about urban rewilding. Secondly, we wanted to bring that into the London context. So obviously when you look at the research, there's quite a lot that's out there, that is much broader and wider than London. So we wanted to say, well, actually, what do Londoners think? So Sean conducted a number of interviews, and we also had a survey of 660 people asking key questions, so we could quantitatively assess this as well as qualitatively assess this. And then from all that, we want your help in designing number 3. Once we've done that, we'll go on to the next bit, is once we've designed something, we'll test, does it work, how it works, does it work for some people and not others. Now, underpinning this is the behaviour change wheel. And I'm going to talk through this. So if it just looks like colours on the screen, then don't worry, we are going to talk through it, and this is what the handout is for as well. So the behaviour change wheel, it's a model of behaviour. So it tries to explain why people exhibit certain behaviours. And it says that any behaviour, brushing your teeth, taking part in physical activity, smoking, I work in public health, any behaviour, gardening for wildlife, is a combination of 6 things, or 3 things, but each of those 3 is spoken into 2. So you need to have the capability to do it, the opportunity to do it, and the motivation to do it. And if you have all of those 3 things, then behaviours occur. Not necessarily good behaviours, they could be bad behaviours as well. So they break each of those 3 areas down. So to have the capability, you need to have the physical capability, physical strength, physical stamina, but you also need the psychological capability, the knowledge why it's important, awareness of something. So that's internal to the person. The other thing that is internal to the person is motivation. So they've split this down, that the authors of this model would split it down into reflective motivation, so thinking about it, actually I've evaluated it and I think it's a bad idea, so I'm not going to do it, or I've evaluated it and I think it's a good idea, so I am going to do it. But also automatic motivation, our habits, our emotions, our feelings, the things that make us do things without even really thinking about it. So that's also internal to the person, and they're kind of interrelated. So having a knowledge of something can obviously influence your motivation to do it. Being motivated to do something might change your knowledge in a particular area or your mental stamina. Things that are external to the person are the opportunities. So the opportunities afforded by the environment. And again, they've split this down into 2. So the physical opportunity, the time, the resources, but also the social opportunity, those social norms. Do you have friends and family to support you? What do your neighbours think? So there's these 6 components, and they call it the COM-B models for capability, opportunity, motivation equals behaviour. Now that's the green bit. Now outside of that, when they designed this, they called this the behaviour change wheel. So they looked at 19 different frameworks to design intervention strategies, the ways to make people change. And they said, okay, well, we're going to split those, we're going to consolidate those 19 frameworks, and they've come up with 9 intervention functions, so 9 ways you can influence somebody's behaviour. I'm going to go here. So you've got 9 ways to influence somebody's behaviour. So you could educate them, you could improve their knowledge, increase their understanding. You could persuade them using communication to induce positive or negative feelings. You could create an expectation of reward, so you can incentivise people, so the carrot. But equally, you could have the stick, so you've got the punishment. You could train people, so giving people skills to do something. You could put restrictions in place to reduce opportunities to engage in any particular behaviour. You could change the social or physical context of somewhere. So if I wanted you all to stand, I could remove all the chairs before you all got here. And you wouldn't know it, but all of a sudden you're spending less time being sedentary. We could model people, so we could provide a model of people doing it, so people aren't afraid to do it. So we talked about your neighbours paving over their gardens. If they were the only one, then does that create a social norm to not do it? If everyone's doing it, then it creates a bit of a social norm. So, or we can model somebody digging up and then rewilding. That's, people might then model that behaviour. And then we've got enablement, which is increasing means and reducing barriers over and above education and training. So maybe giving people tools to do something. If I can refer to your handout for a minute. So there are 3 tables in this handout. And when we reviewed the literature, this is the first stage. sorry if I didn't. Yeah, I just wanted to. So this first stage, the review of the existing literature. When we looked at capability, so the knowledge, skills, and ability to engage in behaviour, psychological or physical, these top two boxes are what we found. And the little numbers in brackets are the references. So if you want to find them yourself.
Does anyone else?
Has everyone else got one?
Put your hand out. Hands up if you need a handout.
So when we look at these top two boxes, we've got barriers, what gets in the way, and facilitators. So what we found broadly, and this is for you to look at as well as we go through today, because it's going to form the basis of what we do this afternoon. So you might want to make notes or highlight things that you think are really important maybe to you, or that you think are important to others, because we can't change everything, but we can change a few things. So you might say, I think this is super important, this is what we should change. So the barriers in terms of psychological capability, the knowledge, basically lack of awareness of biodiversity, lack of knowledge, not knowing what species are native to the particular area. But facilitators having the knowledge, having the awareness, broadly, that was what we found. In terms of capability, the physical capability, there was age-related decline. If people weren't physically able to do gardening or gardening for wildlife, they had that lack of physical capability, they weren't able to do it. But equally, if they had that, then they could do it, but also trying to develop skills and the use of particular tools to help people. Social opportunity or physical opportunity, this is the resources, so lack of time, lack of money, lack of plant availability, lack of space, were all barriers. Having access to those things were all facilitators. Access to money, expertise, access to land, having ownership of a garden, having a large garden, living in a rural area, having the opportunity, the physical opportunity to interact with nature, having the time to spend in your garden. These were all things that came up under physical opportunity. The social opportunity, so this was around neatness and garden rules that people had. So, my garden has to be neat because my neighbour's garden is neat, which could be seen as modelling. They're modelling that behaviour potentially. There's this kind of unwritten social norm. Sensitivity to neighbours' concerns. But then the facilitators, back gardens, there was less pressure because people couldn't necessarily see them. Personal values, people who didn't mind and actually kind of identified with messiness and rewilding, that was a facilitator. Having an open-mindedness, social aspects of community gardening projects, visiting the countryside. These were all facilitators to urban rewilding that we found in the literature. Moving on to motivation, so this reflective motivation. So over here, brain processes which direct our decisions and behaviours, the ones we think about, where we actually take the time to evaluate it. Controlling unwanted vegetation, feeling a need to control nature for aesthetic purposes, having not liking particular wildlife. They were the reflective motivational barriers. The facilitators, ability to choose what you wanted to do, having options, having a compatibility with the way you wanted your garden to look, compatibility with your functional preferences, putting shade, drought resistance, something that's low maintenance. This flips over to the other side as well, the next page. Having an interest in native plants or favoured species. Perceived impact locally and nationally, doing your bit to help biodiversity. They were all facilitators. There were a few more barriers on this side as well, which are similar. Perceived lack of space, safety and well-being concerns, particularly around certain types of wildlife coming through. So these are kind of the overarching things that were coming through. There are a few more nuanced differences that you can look at in the break. Automatic motivation, so this fear, this dislike of species, which seemed to be, from the literature, influenced by early determinants. Early life determines attitudes in later life. And that the facilitators of that, again, relate to early life determinants of attitude, so influence in schools, past experiences, positive emotions towards wildlife, satisfaction from attracting wildlife. So they were the facilitators, the automatic facilitators, automatic motivation around habits, fears, emotions, feelings, emotions. And there were some demographic differences in the literature, cultural differences, high socioeconomic status, people who are more educated, having a left-wing political sensibility, owning a cat or a dog, seem to be facilitators of urban rewilding. So we're just reporting what the literature tells us in this instance. So that's the behaviour and what we understand about the behaviour. Now the question is, what do we change and why and how? And what do we think is going to have the biggest impact? So the second part was, so what we found is these results is that actually understanding the literature is in its infancy, so there's not a lot of literature out there, so it's quite a new and emerging research area. All of these factors are in there, so there is something under every single combi factor. There is capability issues, there are motivation issues, there are opportunity issues. Physical capability seemed to have the least influence, or certainly the least amount of mentions. And facilitators, there are a lot more facilitators than barriers, which is good. Because normally people, it's quite easy to talk about barriers and things that are wrong. So it seems like it is something that could potentially change. So now what do we do about it? So if I can go on to table 2. So I've introduced these intervention functions. And these are some of the ways that we could influence urban rewilding. And these are the ones to keep in mind for later, because once we go through the workshops about what you think we could do to bring about change, these are some of the areas where we can potentially do it, because the literature out there says they've been successful. So we could educate people, so we could start young and we could do nature education in the schools, or better nature education in the schools, knowing that when we get to adulthood it's going to have that bigger influence, because it's going to influence that automatic motivation and change people's habits by putting those attitudes in very early on in life. We could pass on knowledge, so we could educate people throughout their life. We could raise awareness of wildlife gardening practices. As I said, education on biodiversity, conservation activities, sustainable behaviours, sustainable cities. So all of this education piece we could take part in. We could have contextualised and customised information based on particular attitudes or particular demographics, if that might work. We could train people. So this is giving people the skills on how to do something. So through neighbourhood garden meetings, volunteering in local nature programs and giving people the opportunities to do that. One thing that came out, tracking wildlife, seems to come out, giving people access to equipment to track wildlife in their garden, was a way of kind of monitoring the impact of urban rewilding, and that seemed to come across as quite positive. We could persuade people using tailored, persuasive messages, provide people with encouragement. Some of the literature said government mandates for action and persuasion from the top level had an impact. Positive communication, not just about biodiversity, but what they called this triple win. So actually do this to improve your health, do this to improve equity, do this to improve environmental sustainability. So maybe the message isn't this is going to help wildlife, it's going to help the environment. Actually, it could be do this for another reason that is more important to you. We can incentivise people with tax incentives, make things cheaper. There was some coercion, intervention functions, so tax increases. The question, I would question whether we think that's appropriate or not. And then enablement, so you could provide garden assessments. This is how you could bring about change. You could provide design toolkits, which we've already seen is part of rewildmystreet. Digital gardening applications, linking volunteers to rewilding opportunities, provision of regular opportunities to experience the natural environment in a local area, access to grants to help people make a change, access to government funding, create a bit of a hybrid model by getting businesses involved as well as public funding. Sorry if this keeps going, I'll give it one more try. As we go on to the next page, use of role models, which was mentioned earlier, modelling other households, having a council that leads by example, environmental restructuring. It kind of is, we've tried to do this anyway by the behaviour of rewilding is kind of restructuring the environment itself, but using public health as a pathway to bring about change, to enhance community gardening. So it's not just about, it's about health rather than biodiversity. Or restrictions, setting clear gardening rules. So what practices should and shouldn't be performed. So these are the key things about understanding the behaviour, and you can see there was lots in there, and then potentially ways we could influence it. Now you might say, don't think any of those are any good, I think we should do this instead. And that's absolutely fine. That's what today's all about, is to get you to be creative and come up with things that you think might work. So again, all of the intervention functions are relevant. Education, training, enablement seem to have the most influence, so giving people the knowledge, and that's generally a precursor of behaviour change. People think, well, if we tell people to do something, then they'll do it. And that's not always the case. But people do need to kind of understand certain things before they change, in the main. But if we're trying to do urban rewilding, not necessarily for biodiversity, but for other means, then that knowledge and education could have a slightly different angle to it. Coercion and restriction have the least influence. And there's a need for action across multiple areas, so it's not just one thing that's going to work. Doing multiple intervention functions is likely to have an impact. So we've said we think coercion and restrictions are probably a bad idea because it's hitting people with a stick, and I'm not sure that's particularly positive. So we've just put a cross through those. But if you feel strongly that we should hit people with sticks, then that's absolutely fine. But we just thought, because this is being recorded, we should say that we shouldn't. So the final part of this wheel, to show you what this final grey bit. So what's that? So they call them policy categories. I don't particularly like the term because it makes people think of government, but it's kind of intervention strategies. So how do you bring these intervention functions to life? So how, we said we want to educate people. Well, actually, how do we do it? So they have come up with, sorry, I'm going to go back to here, a number of ways to do it. So we've got guidelines. We can provide guidelines for people on what to do. We could provide planning guidance and environmental and social planning. We could do communications and marketing campaigns. We could put legislation in, and that could be at the top level or even locally. Regulations, fiscal measures, tax incentives, increased taxes, or we can provide services. This is probably where rewildmystreet will fit in here, providing a service, but also probably provides guidelines and communications and marketing, for example. So that's probably where this particular intervention fits. The aim of this is to help people think about all the different options. It's not to confuse people. If it confuses people, I would suggest putting it to one side and just think about what you think is important and let us decide where it fits. But the idea is that you kind of think, okay, if I want to change this, which intervention functions work? And then if I use those intervention functions, which of these intervention strategies are likely to bring it to life? So if I can go to table 3. So this again is what the literature tells us could work. So communications and marketing kind of speaks for itself. We can highlight the benefits, targeted campaigns, co-creation of communications with residents. So with you guys to actually come up with messages we think that would work. Social planning, so planning policies to create urban green spaces and human interaction with wildlife, with rewilded landscapes. Getting local areas to participate in monitoring and evaluation of wildlife in their local area. Legislation, and again this is not what we say is a good idea, it's just what the literature tells us. Banning pesticides, controlling invasive species, fines for illegal tree felling. I'm not saying that, sorry, I should preface that, I'm not saying that these are good things, but I'm just saying that we're just reporting here what the literature tells us. Service provision, which we've already mentioned. Regulation, use of National Environmental Performance Index. Taxes related to garden vegetation. Help with rewilding costs. Again, fines for unwanted practices. And then guidelines around how to do this, so toolkits for residents. So keep these in mind. You might think, actually, that's a good idea, that's a terrible idea, and cross things through, but take these through to you with the workshops for this afternoon. When we looked at the literature, again, all of them were there. Environmental and social planning had the most influence in marketing communications, regulation, the least influence, and again, there's this need to have action across multiple areas and multiple stakeholders. So don't just think about influencing people, Londoners, but actually, do we need to influence local decision makers or national decision makers or people in the third sector that can lobby for certain things? So we've got kind of this blank sheet of paper about what we could do, but this is what the literature tells us that might work, so it should influence what we come up with. It will certainly be in our minds as we go through it.
Yep, so that was a good overview of the literature. So there are not that many papers, but there are lots of content in there, which I'm sure is slightly overwhelming, but we'll guide you with it this afternoon. But it's good that it gives us lots of things to think about. We then wanted to bring that into a London context, Greater London, through the Stage 2 work that we did. So I did interviews with 20 of you, some of which have come along today, and we then did a larger scale quantitative survey questionnaire of over 600 London residents. So I'll talk through the interviews as I did that. What we did was at each stage we're using this behaviour model of a COM-B to give us a discipline, a framework to categorise things and help us come up with themes then which are of our own naming. So you can see in this table that we went through and we used kind of questions and prompts in the interviews that would help to draw out answers under some of these kind of categories about capability, opportunity and motivation. And we then came up with themes under those. So again, physical capability, as in the literature review, didn't come up a lot, but certain tasks might require heavy lifting, digging a pond or something. That came up as a possible issue that would stop rewilding. In terms of psychological capability, so having the knowledge, people seemed very keen to have more knowledge, wanting to know about certain things, wanting to learn by experience and having sources of inspiration that they could draw from. People were also generally interested in the bigger picture, so how rewilding fitted into environmental action generally and contributing to a sort of wider global sort of effort. In terms of opportunity, for sort of physical opportunity, people were sort of very aware of their local conditions, and that might be the sort of biodiversity and species that they already found around them, and that might make them want to attract certain things that they knew were in the immediate area. But also the kind of local climate, and particularly how that's changing in recent years with noticing the effects of climate change. So people were thinking about starting to plant different types of plants that might be more tolerant of drought or flooding or whatever. People cited the amount of space quite often. Sometimes that it wasn't a problem, but it was something that they had to bear in mind in terms of what they were working with. But generally it didn't come up as big an issue as you would think. Having time to garden was very much a kind of concern for people, that they would like to do it more, but they didn't have the time with busy London lives to get out in the garden as much as they would like to. In terms of opportunity from a sort of social side, so the influence of others, maybe sort of reflecting the loneliness of Londoners, people were really keen to use rewilding as a way to engage with their wider community, so really saw those kind of community benefits that could come from getting involved in rewilding activities. That was a sort of sense of teamwork, but also a sense that it'd be good to raise awareness through a whole local community rather than just with individuals or less kind of focused on a geographic area. There was also the influence of government, either at local, national or arguably in London regional level, was seen as important, and their role in kind of communicating a wider strategy of what we were trying to do as a country, as a region, as a council, showing that they were very much supporting rewilding and the efforts of people in the community of residents, and so that supporting might have a sort of financial or logistical element going beyond the encouraging rewilding, which was also seen as important. So I think people didn't want to be acting on their own, they wanted to feel part of a community and a sort of official effort, if you like. In terms of motivation, reflective motivation came up a lot, again, as we saw in the literature review. So people were motivated by appreciating the wider benefits, which might be personal benefits for their own health, mental well-being, that kind of thing. People were sort of thinking about nature, so thinking about what can I do to do something better, do something good for nature, which might be in the broader sense of helping the environment generally, or there were also other things about, say, enhancing growing for food, so maybe planting companion plants or thinking about natural ways to deal with pests by encouraging more predators like hedgehogs or whatever into your garden. There was very much a theme about creating a haven, so a kind of escape for yourself from the rest of the city. It was quite interesting. And there was very much, you'll see that a lot of these interrelate. So interrelated to the having time to garden was these competing priorities on your time. So that might have been about time, that might have been about functional things in the garden, so wanting to have space for your kids to play football instead, or to have barbecues, or things like that might be competing with having wilder areas. Also aesthetic priorities, so not wanting your garden to look a certain way, which rewilding was sort of perceived to make happen, but also kind of safety things. So there were a lot of things that came up about, for example, people who had dogs, wanting to make sure their gardens were safe for dogs in terms of dogs not being able to escape, dogs not getting injured or poisoned by certain plants, so that was interesting. And people were also concerned about cats, generally other people's cats coming and predating stuff in the garden. So the pets is a kind of interesting area, particularly as we saw from the literature review that having a pet makes you more likely to do rewilding. So it's something we need to balance, I think. In terms of automatic motivation, I think this was the one that probably I, as an interviewer, us coming up with the questions and people being interviewed, find quite hard to articulate because it's kind of a subconscious thing. So you'll see that it came out as quite important from the next stage, but it is quite a difficult area to talk about because it's so rooted in your sort of feelings and beliefs that you might not even admit to yourself. But in terms of that, we identified themes around feelings about nature, so loving or hating certain species, and those weren't always the same ones, except rats came up quite universally as being hated, but other things, foxes, quite divisive, for example. Feeling a certain way, like a real kind of desire to help the environment and need, and also on a more personal level, feeling a need to connect with nature from a kind of elemental sort of mental health point of view. Habits came up from that as well, so if people were in the habit of doing something a certain way in terms of their gardening practice, that or going in the garden every weekend or every day, that would help them to continue that practice. And in terms of demographic factors, the only thing that really came out of the interviews was the issue of age, and that was particularly about the age of children in a household. So if people had young children or talked about their children when they were younger, they were often saying, we did this kind of activity together, and we made this pond and it was really fun. But now they're teenagers and they're not interested anymore, and nature's not cool, we're not really doing that anymore. So it was quite interesting about the age of children in the household affecting what the whole household did in a way. So I will let Justin continue on
so
this.
in addition, we had this survey that went out and asked a few questions. So it says, have you taken part in urban rewilding? Gave some examples. So we had 660 people respond. We also had questions about capability to take part. So do you feel that you are physically capable to do this on a scale? Do you feel that you have the knowledge, the awareness to take part? Do you have the opportunities, etc., etc.? So there was 6 questions about each of those 6 combi stages: psychological capability, physical capability, social and physical opportunity, and automatic motivation. We also collected information on age, gender, membership of a conservation organisation, garden type, garden size. And what we found is that actually, when we put all those in a model and controlled for everything, so we said if everybody was the same age or the same gender, so we took all those things out, which factors actually significantly predict taking part in urban rewilding? And actually, from the COM-B components, only automatic motivation was the significant predictor. So actually, this sort of, as Sian said, these feelings that we struggle to sort of talk about because they're just our habits, they're our beliefs, they're our values. It was that significantly influenced or predicted whether people were going to take part or not, and those that actually were connected to nature are more likely to take part, which is shocking. But it did show that all these other things weren't significant predictors. So it seems that trying to influence that is what's going to have the biggest influence and change in this particular behaviour, potentially. We also found, and correct me if I'm wrong, because Alex did all this, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but age, gender, membership of a conservation organisation, garden type were significant demographic predictors. So older age is a significant predictor, bigger garden, a significant predictor, being a member of a conservation organisation.
What age is age?
Because we put the actual age, we collected year of birth. So I can't remember, I can tell you afterwards, but it's like a continuum. So as people got older, they were X amount more likely to take part in this behaviour. So it wasn't like there was a cut, it sort of grew as people got older. So they were the significant predictors. Again, probably things that we might come up with actually. Being a member of a conservation organisation, more likely to be connected to nature, having a garden that you can do this behaviour in, perceived to be able to do this behaviour in. So they were also significant predictors.
I think the garden type was whether you had like a balcony, communal garden, a private garden, a courtyard garden. That the kind of physical characteristics of it, if you like.
Yeah. So the other things that we collected did come across as significant. And that's not to say that they might not be important, because obviously they're important individual, and what works for one doesn't work for another. But when we're looking at this kind of population level, trying to influence change amongst big groups of people, these were the things that came across as the most important. We also looked at what type of activities people took part in. So rewilding can be a number of different things. So it's not just one behaviour on its own. So people could obviously select multiple of these behaviours. It wasn't so they don't add up to 100%. But the biggest percentage of people who took part in this behaviour, 45.4% provided food, 43% provided water, 40% provided homes for wildlife, 25% provided connectivity between gardens, and 30% had a nature-friendly garden. And I think it was about 75% of people said that they'd done take part. Yeah, so it was about 3/4 of the people said that they'd taken part in some sort of activity. That does suggest that our sample may, well, we don't really know because we don't know what the norm is. But our sample could have been people more likely to do it because they're interested in this research. So about 75%.
One question at the back of this without underlining, especially if we got a bit earlier, but everything so far has been very process driven, and it's basically under the headline of rewilding.
Yeah.
Without any definition of what that is. And over 50 years I've had this argument council report. A lot of what you described, it was an undergo that is more cultivated than the average herbaceous border, but for a biodiversity and having different objectives. Whereas plenty of people I know either too much prefer the sort of red and tourism for whatever nature they will do. And if you suddenly have foxes eating waterfalls, shouting, that's nature. It's a very wide remit that I'm getting at. So within the statistics, I'm trying to sort of delineate it.
I mean, that was partly what this question was trying to get towards, because when we did the literature, the first stage of the study, one of the things that came out both for us and for people kind of peer reviewing it for journals was that, you know, what is a definition of rewilding, obviously. So what we're trying to do is address that as we go through the stages of the study. So part of what we're going to do in an exercise to get you to contribute to is what you think rewilding means, and then I'll show you some definitions that we've used in the study and that other people have come up with. But these categories actually came from a Wildlife Trust survey, and we pretty much followed those to try to come up with lots of examples of what people might consider rewilding, which are quite broad, you know, providing food, providing water. You can do that in different ways, different styles.
But not picking, but in that one sentence, wildlife, rewilding, and not necessarily the same thing.
No, sure.
But anyway, sorry.
I mean, my view, if it helps, is that in an urban context, we should be thinking about rewilding as a principle. It's not going to be what it is in a rural context. We can't get back to a self-sustaining ecosystem. There's just not the scale. So I take it quite lightly, but obviously as researchers we do need to be probing that as we go as well. But it's not an easy question.
It's not a criticism.
No, it's good.
From the practical point, I'll shut up here. A relatively large for London centres have got small front garden, but they're very much on the street. I've never wanted a massive wall. So I've always had natural-ish. And 30 odd years ago, I basically just let nature take over. And we get loads of stuff in there, including for about 20 acres, various emails. Can't anybody have a word with all that? Now, all of a sudden, the word has got out. Just hang around the corner, you can see bees, but you can't see a mountain. And they bring their kids to hover on the other side. But so, it's not right or wrong, but it's just the words have got a different connotation.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to try and elicit your help with that difficult question, but my view is that there's room for different approaches, and leaving it is one good approach. The thing about gardens is that they create this mosaic of habitats because everyone has different preferences.
And a lot of conservation ecologists are getting more and more interested in urban rewilding because it's actually so much is going on in the countryside that's not good for wildlife, like the intensive farming, and urban areas often provide really interesting habitats for certain species. So there's a lot of research going into that. So actually sometimes they can be better for some species, which is really interesting.
That's right, yeah. But we don't have the perfect answer, but we're working towards something.
Just quickly, I wasn't looking for better, best, or whatever, just
no.
potential clarity.
Yeah.
It's a really important question because it's the starting point, isn't it? What is it we're trying to do? And this is what, I'm a social scientist, but what I find really interesting is that actually this is 101 different things. So how do we influence it in the best possible way? And whatever we come up with is not going to work for everybody, but it's a start. And then the idea is that we test who it does work for and who it doesn't work for. Why doesn't it work for those people, and then use something different for those people? Because everything's going to work for someone, hopefully, one person. And then you can kind of build on it, and then you have this sort of overarching strategy for how we influence whatever environment. But there is a workshop session, isn't there?
Yeah, which I think we'll squeeze in before lunch, probably. So, with your help, what we're doing now in stage 3 is coming up with a sort of tentative intervention strategy. So we're here today having the research day, so you've got through all the talks, well done. And then we're going to kind of get you involved and talk and have some workshops that will help work around these ideas and come up with some kind of loose strategy with you, the London residents. We're then going to put together a steering group and have probably online meetings with those, and that might include some residents, but it's more likely to be people like councils, conservation organisations. So if any of you are interested in being part of that steering group after the event, then let us know at some point today, particularly if you have a wider role for kind of where you can influence more people than just yourself, if you like. So we'll be doing that afterwards, and then meeting as a research team to sort of make sense of the crazy amount of data that we'll probably get out of this afternoon. Then once we've come up with an intervention strategy, obviously we will try to test some of that on rewildmystreet. Until we know what it is, we can't really preempt how we're going to test that, but that will be the next challenge. And that is the kind of final stage that we're funded for, at least in terms of this research. But I think it might well open up other questions. We're also putting together a toolkit which would be aimed at policymakers, designers and conservation organisations, which will hopefully distill everything that we've learned from stages 1, 2 and 3 into a kind of palatable and hopefully beautiful document that we can then give out to people to influence, who can have influence in this area. And again, the nature of that will depend a little bit on what comes out of today. Did you want to talk about these? No? Okay. So I think before we break for lunch, we just wanted to start getting you involved and do a quick exercise about what the hell urban rewilding is, which is a thorny question. We're going to do this in a high-tech way, which is hopefully going to work. So you will need a phone or device. If you don't have one or aren't comfortable doing that, you can shout into someone's ear. It's going to be it's a sort of anonymous voting system that is hopefully going to create a sort of word cloud of all our responses. So we want you to think about what is urban rewilding, and you can either scan that QR code to get to the page where you will see hopefully this, which says what is urban rewilding to you, and consider rewilding activities and maybe characteristics that are relevant to London's private gardens. And you can enter words or phrases and then put submit. Just 1 second. Otherwise, you can go to this website and it will ask you to enter a code, and this should take you through to the same bit. Yeah.
Do you have a non-IT?
Yes, we'll get some paper so you can.
Yeah. Does anyone else need non-IT? You could also, these are single-sided, you could just write on there. Is anyone having trouble getting to the page? Has anyone managed to get to the page? Yeah. Amazing, okay. I'm going to leave that up for a bit, and then I can hopefully get through to the results. And take your time, feel free to discuss among your table. Yeah, pop your hand up if you prefer to do a piece of paper and then hand it back to the team and we'll put them in for you.
Just my idea of what urban rewilding is.
Yeah, it can be like a single word, a phrase. Hopefully you can do this a bit more. Three is better. I mean, if we're doing 2 groups, it's quite easy. In terms of rooms and rotation, how would we do that? Yeah, basically we have 3 staff teams.
I've submitted.
And it's possible some people might sneak off.
Google tells me it's right.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think it's easier to organise. And then who do you think should be in each?
Should we split it down?
Yeah, I mean about us.
Oh,
Okay. Should we have one team doing the pyramids and one team doing yeah. In terms of what these guys have done before. And then see if this works. This is a bit unwinding. Yeah, I probably would have thought of that if I was Okay. So we're starting to get this magical word cloud appearing on the screen. I know it's going to be hard to see because there's lots of things, but yeah, we'll start to read out some of the things.
So it will update as we go. So people submit. So leading spaces to grow, nature connectedness, multi-species interactions, more biodiversity. Also, I should say that I think that if people type in the same thing, the words will become bigger. So behaviour change, marginal gains, happy, public awareness, ecology, thrive, nature, green, challenging, wildlife habitats, bring nature back, so native species, nature-friendly cities, places to be left wild, let nature take over, more biodiversity. So biodiversity's come up obviously a few times.
So it's quite interesting. I would say that a lot of those things are quite intangible in a way. There are a few specific things like ladybirds and soil, something I saw, but a lot of them are quite a little bit vague, a little bit intangible, do you think?
It's kind of linked to that automatic motivation, isn't it? It's kind of like a mindset shift.
Yeah.
Back on my string pedal. Sorry.
Go for it.
What is urban rewilding? Could be almost this is your dictionary definition, which is roughly what I've done there. But it could be, for instance, what activities rewilding is say, which are completely different.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that kind of context at the top of what's relevant to London's private gardens.
Thank you.
Is important.
Particularly the underlying buildings, parks, canals,
yeah.
railway lines, planned current housing developments, planned new and planned developments.
Great. Okay. Okay, so I think that's really useful, and we will make sure we keep adding to it for free. We will make sure we include that in our ongoing search for a definition for rewilding, but I think that's a really useful exercise, and hopefully that's interesting for you to see how broad it is in terms of what different people think it is, and how challenging a question it is. Are there any other slides you want to go through now?
Should we just introduce that?
Yeah. So yeah, I think we'll just explain the plans for the afternoon, and then it will hopefully be a good time to break for lunch. So I've had to take in a lot. Oh, sorry, I wanted to show you this as well. So we've done that. Here are some definitions that other people have come up with for what urban rewilding is. So the one we started with as the basis of this study, which now feels quite restrictive, was one in a 2017 paper which says urban rewilding is incorporating native plants and animals into urban infrastructure, which I don't think I agree with anymore, but we're learning as we go. A couple more definitions have been come up with since, because urban rewilding itself is a pretty new term. So Rewilding Britain, which is the sort of poster organisation for rural mainly and urban rewilding nationally, says that urban rewilding is focused on bringing nature and wild spaces, whatever they are, into cities and towns to benefit wildlife and people's mental and physical health. So there's that idea of it's not just about wildlife, but it's what it can give to citizens, which I think is important. And then I mentioned the GLA Mayor's London Rewilding Task Force earlier, and their report includes a definition which is that urban rewilding is an activity that seeks to reinstate natural processes and, where appropriate, missing species, allowing nature to shape the landscape to provide wider benefits for wildlife and people. So again, that's about capturing the benefits for people, but to me that feels quite tricky to do in gardens potentially. Obviously it's intended for the city as a whole and with more of a focus on the public spaces. But those are some things we can kind of keep in mind when we're trying to get to a good definition of what rewilding might mean in private gardens.
So, can I ask?
Yeah.
Do you know about the Trust for Urban Ecology?
Tell me.
Trust for Urban Ecology.
No, I don't.
It started up directly after the Second World War.
Mm-hmm.
That has been doing this work since then.
Mm-hmm.
They then became BCTV, and they are now the Trust for TCV.
Oh, I know
Trust
TCV,
for
yeah.
Conservation Volunteers.
Okay, yeah, I do.
It started out directly after the Second World War to use up all the bombed areas so that children could play safely and residents could grow their own food. And then when the contractors got the money, so they started building on those places, they negotiated to get other plots of land to carry on with what they were doing.
Yeah,
so all that data that they collected, and then the other one is when was it, 2010, Grow Well, where we had 9 million pounds across London for the most deprived areas in each borough to have programmes which did all this.
Yeah, there are some really good funding opportunities through the Mayor, and they sort of change.
So it's not so much about the funding, it's that what you've been talking about was done in 2040 when the war ended, and 2010 when the Well London project was on.
Did they have it?
And because the National Lottery are awful, the data they want, they've got all this data, they must still have it.
Okay, but not about gardens specifically?
Well, yes, because it was people using their garden. I mean, the estate we were on, we did the gardens and the green spaces.
Okay.
And in fact, we're still doing the gardens on most of the people on that estate.
Yeah, and now TCV is sort of has lots of different regional branches as well.
That's
okay.
Another
Okay.
It's a local group that grew up out of the Well London project, who are still running the we'll come round and do your garden and you come and help us on our main project thing in the raised beds that we built in 2010. And it's still standing.
Yeah, and there are also things like postcode gardener in some parts of Hackney where they've done certain things with front gardens and things and helping people rewild, if you like. Okay, so we'll talk a bit then about what's going to happen this afternoon after we have an edifying lunch. And the idea is that we split into groups for workshops. I think we're going to do 2 groups and then we can kind of alternate you between the slightly different themed workshops. And the sort of overarching question, if you like, is going to be what would it take to increase rewilding in London's private gardens? So quite open-ended. And yeah, as a staff team, we'll be kind of splitting between those workshop groups. We're going to be using the behaviour change wheel in the back of our minds. There is an interactive version of that. Do we want to show that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, all I was going to say is you've got I don't know why sheets are gone. So you've got the handouts which will help you. We've got focus group activities for one group, and we've got where we've got a series of questions. I don't know if anyone's been involved in focus groups before. That's just basically a sit in a chat where the team will ask a few questions and we'll talk about them. It's not like we'll go through each question and get everybody to respond. We've got kind of key areas we want to talk about, and then we'll just get your views on it. And then you'll switch and you'll do a bit more of an activity around intervention design. So we'll think about what activities you think should take place, what action should happen, what you think those activities will influence. So we call those kind of intermediate outcomes. So which of those commonly components do you think the activities you suggest will influence, and what's your overarching goal for the thing that you come up with? And you might, as we go through that, we might come up with something that we want to actually, we want to influence people in schools. So we're going to do all these activities. Actually, we want to influence local communities. So we're going to do these activities, and we'll just get as many done as we can in the time that we've got available. So there's two kind of workshop activities, and we'll switch between the two. Each one will take about 45-50 minutes. To keep people healthy, we put 1-2 floors down, so we'll take the stairs if they wish, we'll take the lift.
But I think if everyone comes back here, we'll do like this half of the room, one group, that half room, the other group, and we'll guide you down to the other space.
This side, there's less people on this side, so if there's only 1 or 2 volunteers that want to go in this group, that would be helpful to balance the group. So where they are.
Yeah, so I think we'll break for lunch. If we can come back to this room at 1 o'clock, and then we'll tell you which group is going to do what first, and the team will take you down to the other room if you're starting off there.
Is there any questions?
Yeah, any questions? I also wanted to say that you've got a little pencil in your goodie bag, which is a seed pencil. The way you do it is you can either plant the whole pencil. I think it says they're meant to be for bees, the pack of seeds. So, but you'll get different plants, which I think it says on the end of the pencil. Is that right? What have you got there? Sage. If you want to still use the pencil, which kind of makes sense to me, you can snap it off. But you plant the whole thing. You don't peel it off. It's just like a mini seed bomb.
You know what the seeds are?
It says on the bottom that there are packs for pollinators, and this lady's got sage, Hannah's got sage, and they're all different ones that are meant to attract bees. So I think there's thyme. What else has people got? It was a mixed a mixed selection. So let us know if they work. I've not tried them before, but Marbelle has.
We have tried them.
I'm going to go and set up.
Do you need any help? Let me just stop this.